we can start. And Randy, as I was saying, we'll just do super brief introductions of us, just for any of us that you haven't met yet, so you have a sense who the audience is, and then we'll turn it over to you. So starting with myself, Doug Hanna, I moderate this esteemed group, longtime Natick resident since I guess the early 80s, heavily involved in the work of the First Congregational Church that's right there in the center of town. And Sarah?
And Sarah Hanna. I have been a town meeting member for many, many years and involved in various things around town. Retired as a geologist, cleaning up hazardous waste sites. So I'm really looking forward to learning more about how the whole affordable housing process works, because it's not something within my realm of personal expertise. So looking forward to it.
Thanks, Sarah. Elaine?
Elaine Ostroff. I'm Josh's mother. And relatively new to Natick and approaching my 90th birthday.
Wow, congratulations.
That's exciting.
Exciting.
Very cool. Thanks. Bill.
Hi, Bill Ramage. I'm a newly elected town meeting member up for re-election next year. I helped Pat with Keep Natick Beautiful, and we did some nice work at Pegan Cove yesterday with Carrie's help and Pat's help and some other kids. So happy about that. Also active in First Congregational Church, and looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thanks. Carrie?
Hey, good morning, Randy. Good to have you join us here. Our little niche group here. And just an FYI, I'm going to call the water department today after the meeting and schedule that meter read for you. And you know me, I guess town meeting member, concerned environmentalist, and a few other things. So nice to have you with us today.
Thanks, Carrie. Cindy?
Cindy Bates. I live in Natick Center. I'm 3 years in Natick and a trail steward. And I think I met you at the party, the CPA party. And I'm so glad you're here, because housing is one of the things that I really don't know very much about. So I started to learn more about it at that party, and looking forward to hearing your talk.
Thanks, Cindy. Carol?
Yeah, good morning, Randy. I'm Carol Berkowitz. I've been a town meeting member, and I've lived in Natick for over 50 years. I live on Lake Achitchewat. So I am excited to hear what you have to say. Housing is such an important issue for the town. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Sally?
Good morning. I'm Sally Hopkins, and it's nice to have you with us, Randy. Coffee with a Purpose is really one of Natick's best kept secrets, but we're trying not to keep it secret. We really love thinking about the town, and one of your issues, housing, is huge. I have to say I'm Pat Conaway's sister, and that gives me a lot of joy and pride.
And cloud.
Yeah, thanks, Sally. Brinley?
Good morning, Randy. So happy that you're here today. Very interested in the topic. I've been in Natick for a few decades now. I'm a town meeting member. I was on the recycling committee before it dissolved for a whole bunch of years. Love the town and very interested in housing, affordable housing. So thank you for being here.
Thanks, Brinley. Catherine?
Town meeting member, affordable housing trustee, and select board member. And I'm off camera because I'm working on my house, so apologies.
Not a problem.
I didn't want to miss this.
Yeah, we're actually getting into our off-camera contingent now. Tom, hi, are you there?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm a Natick resident for about 32, 33 years. I'm town meeting member, and welcome, Randy, and anxious to hear about affordable housing in Natick. Thank you.
Great. And Ricky, are you on? Let's see, we have Jay's window, which is the computer Ricky's using.
muted right now.
Yeah, and Pat told me he's finishing attending to breakfast and will come on camera shortly, but I think you probably know who he is. Yeah. Oh, and Martin as well, obviously. Can't forget.
Yeah, I'm Martin Kessel in many roles, but I guess the ones where we've overlapped the Affordable Housing Trust was the I was on the CPA steering committee, if there was such a thing, but definitely one of the key people in the CPA campaign, and also one of the only 4 people on the 5 Auburn Street RFP committee. So that I'm sure is going to overlap with some of the things that you might say. But in spite of all that, although I support affordable housing, there's very much about it that I don't really know or understand how it works. So I'm eager to hear.
Great, thanks. Ricky, did I see you took yourself off mute? Did you want to? Oh, there you go. Say something? Nope. She'll get to us. I think she's, oh, there you are. Morning, Ricky.
Look,
She'll weigh in once she's got the computer going. So, Randy, let's turn it over to you. Feel free to share a screen if you have slides. Otherwise, we'll just have whatever you would like to tell us. Welcome.
Okay, well, great to be here. I think Elaine left something out of her resume, which was the Westport Affordable Housing Trust. Actually,
Great.
one of the first exposure I had to an affordable housing trust. Our architectural company sometimes does advising to funders of affordable housing projects, and Elaine was instrumental in getting a project moving in Westport, which we were also involved in. So good to be here. It's always a pleasure to talk about the trust and what the trust does, and ultimately put a pitch in for the.
Is there anybody out there that I can hear?
Yeah, we can hear you, Ricky. You need to turn your speakers on, maybe. Can you see anything? Well, I guess she's not hearing me talk, even though the rest of us are.
Maybe someone can text Jay or Ricky.
Yeah.
Sometimes I plug in the earphones and forget that they're plugged in, and it wipes out the sound. There's a message, a direct message.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and continue, Randy, and we'll
okay, good.
Trying to get her going.
Well, a little bit about the history of the trust, okay? There's a community group called the Community Development Advisory Committee, okay? And they're charged with the housing production plan for Natick, of getting that going and, retaining a consultant, getting that moving. And back in 2007, they were doing this, and it came to their realization that having a affordable housing trust in the town was a good idea to help promote the creation of affordable housing. So back in 2007 or 2008, a warrant article was presented to town meeting to create a trust. And the CDAC, that's the acronym for Community Development Advisory Committee, pushed this forward, went through all the hoops with the select board, FinCom, and went to town meeting.
I don't know. Jay's still asleep, and I got on here on my own. So I don't know.
Ricky's with us, I guess, unless she still can't hear us. Ricky, can you hear us now? Looks like she dialed in.
She may be on mute.
Yeah. Okay, maybe try the texting route again, or that the visual aid method.
I tried calling her, but she's apparently on the phone with someone else trying to.
Okay, good. Yeah. So, approximately 14 years ago, that presented the town meeting. There was no FinCom recommendation. the presentation to the town meeting was that the list of the powers or the ability of the trust to get things done was enumerated. There were no specific projects presented to town meeting, nothing in mind, just what the trust could do. There is no ask for money, which helped a lot. And it passed, okay? The town decided that it was to the town's benefit to create an affordable housing trust. Some of the opposition cited that they were creating something that is basically uncontrolled, could be a renegade group of citizens doing crazy things, but reason prevailed and the trust was created. The ultimate formation of the trust happened in 2008. I think there are 2 remaining charter members. Jay is one of them, Jay Ball is one of them, and I'm the other. So there is some continuity that dates back to 2008 on the trust. Well, I mentioned the powers of the trust. We have a pretty great position to get things done in that for a lot of trust actions, we don't need additional approval. And this is very beneficial in the real estate world in that sometimes you do have to act fairly quickly when it comes to, making an offer, deciding to lease something, financial real estate activities that don't need approval of town meeting or select board. The trust has that autonomy to get things done, fairly expediently. And that's a big plus when it comes to, real estate activity. For example, I'll go through the list of powers of the trust. And this is pretty much word for word from the enabling legislation that allows the creation of trusts. We can receive and retain assets pretty much without limitation. We can purchase and sell property. We can lease property. We can employ and pay advisors. We can receive payments that stay with the trust funds. We can create reserve funds. We can borrow money. And we can make property improvements. So it's pretty much a pretty good repertoire of things to get things done. There are requirements, of course. All trust members are appointed by the select board. The town serves as the treasurer in that the trust doesn't have any independent bank accounts. We have to have an annual audit, and we have to go through state procurement regulations with one important exception, and that is we are exempt from 30B, which is the part of the state procurement requirements for the transfer of land conveyance to the trust from the town. So if the town ever decides that a tax title property is surplus and not needed for any other use, it can, without issuing an RFP, transfer it to the trust. So that's, a pretty good benefit to avoid the sort of lengthy RFP process for transfer of property. Funding of the trust is another question, and that is where does the trust get our money from? And it's a variety of sources, and obviously with the CPA passage, that sort of option of where it comes from is dramatically changed. Historically, we've gotten resources from planning board decisions, either in the form of cash or land. Tax title properties, of which we've been involved with 3 properties. The most recent one is the 246 North Main Street project, and town meeting members know that that was a subject matter at the fall town meeting, where there's a pretty much unanimous vote, close to unanimous vote to transfer the property to the select board for ultimate transfer to the trust. We also participate in the West Metro Home Consortium, where federal home funds are divided up between the member communities. And we've used this for a number of projects in the past. Another source is the inclusionary zoning housing bylaw, which was recently incorporated into the town bylaws, which allow, require developments of a certain size to have either a affordable housing component or payment to the trust in lieu of production. And the Windy Low development in South Natick was, I think, the first one to engage in this process. Because construction has been so slow at the site, the trust has not received any funds from this project yet, but ultimately, I think the estimate was up to $800,000 from the developer to the trust once houses start to sell. I drove through there a couple weekends ago, and it doesn't look like much is going on. So that's still down the road. Another important thing that's helped move the trust along is our annual budget request and the town budget of approximately $80,000 per year. And coincidentally, this number was calculated from sort of the absolute minimum that the trust would get from CPA if Natick had CPA. In other words, it would be, the 10% of the 1%, and it works out at a couple of years ago to about 80,000. And we've stuck with this number as supporting administrative functions and odds and ends that the trust is involved in. We've previously been advocates for a real estate transfer fee that a certain percentage of any real estate sale or residential real estate sale would go to the trust. There's a statewide initiative to enact this. So the trust hasn't been that active recently in promoting this at a local level. We did do a town meeting warrant article a couple of years ago proposing that. It did not succeed. In a sense, we probably won't be an active advocate of that locally because of the passage of a CPA. CPA is huge, okay? I'm used to seeing other municipalities, their affordable housing trust fund contributing, 1.2 million, 2 million, 2.5 million of CPA funds to help subsidize affordable housing projects. So it is a very helpful revenue source for the trust. And obviously it's an equally helpful revenue source for historic preservation, open space, recreation too. But, it's throughout Massachusetts, it's used, strongly as a way of getting affordable housing done. Affordable housing projects are extremely expensive, as is any, multifamily residential development. Affordable housing has the added burden of, pretty massive legal costs due to the multiple funders of affordable housing. It's not cheap. It'd be great if it were more expedient, more cost effective, but currently it's a pretty expensive process to do. And like I said, CPA is a sort of it is in a way a game changer as to what the trust can envision as feasible projects. An important thing in applying for, applying through the Department of Housing and Community Development, the state agency that pretty much oversees the low-income housing tax credits and other funding sources for affordable housing. The local match is extremely important, and the CPA funds really help make that local match happen. And like I said, huge step forward for the financial picture of the trust. So that's the background of trust history, how it was formed, what our powers are, and what our funding sources are. We're in the middle of a strategic planning exercise. Actually started in April, and due to schedule issues and whatever, it's taken a while. But our final meeting is tomorrow, where we're trying to wrap up, what the trust is looking to do in the future, what our main goals are, what's the strategy of achieving those goals. And early on in the process, we did a chart that shows trust activities over the entire history of the trust. So I think we'll do a screen share and show what the trust has been up to. There's a hand up.
Yeah, hi, Randy. Could you start with, could you interrupt and just say what is affordable housing?
Well,
I'm really a beginner.
Yeah, well, it's a nuanced question too, and because different funding sources have different definitions of affordable housing. I mean, there's extremely low income, less than 30% of the AMI, the average mean income, and that extends to 120% of the AMI, all falling under umbrellas of what would constitute affordable housing. There's special needs housing for tenants that literally have no income too. So it's a broad range of sort of affordability levels. Some people would say workforce housing, which is close to market housing, would also fall under the umbrella of affordable housing. So it's a wide range of housing that has some element of subsidy, but not always, but typically some element of subsidy, and is below market, prevailing market rates. And while it's challenging to sort of pin down a precise definition of this, the need is fairly apparent. I mean, the state right now says, over the next, X years, 5 years or so, there's a need of 100,000 additional affordable housing units in the Commonwealth. And it's a pressing need both to house people and also for the economic viability of the Commonwealth too, because if it's too expensive to live in a place where you're trying to get employment at a certain wage, then you move somewhere else, and it's not great for economic conditions in the state. So
and is it so it's a rental situation?
Not always. Some affordable housing can be for sale.
Okay.
Typically, that is done with deed restrictions, where the future sale of the property would be subject to selling to a income eligible buyer.
Okay.
So most of affordable housing is rental. And there's also something that's called naturally occurring affordable housing. Okay. And this is, initiatives like zoning initiatives that allow in-law apartments, smaller units, things that sort of would naturally be lower priced. And sometimes this is accomplished through zoning reform, as opposed to, a big development scenario. It's just a change in a zoning approach. Speaking of generally statewide initiatives, one of the most discussed ones now is the, I think it's called the MBTA zoning requirements, where communities with access to public transportation are required to have a plan for the development of affordable housing in proximity to those stations or for public transportation. And so that's another sort of statewide initiative for affordable housing creation. Today,
typically it's multifamily.
Whatever the municipality's plan is,
Okay.
it could take many forms. I think the requirement now is to make a plan.
Okay.
And if you don't make, it's like a little bit of a carrot and stick. If you don't make a plan, then you're not able to secure certain grants.
Okay.
So there's an incentive to make a plan to address this. And there's pushback from a lot of municipalities who see this as changing the character of their, downtowns or town centers, but they need a plan and they have to address that requirement. So, I mean, today, my purpose is pretty much today to talk about the trust, what the trust does. And, we don't do everything, and we certainly don't know everything either. And that's where our ability to hire consultants, we hire legal counsel, we engage development consultants, when it comes to us needing additional expertise, it's available. The trust composition itself is a pretty experienced bunch, though. I mean, we have people working in community development organizations. One person is employed at SMOC. There's an attorney. We typically have a representative from a real estate industry and a banker on the trust. And we right now have a couple architects there, including myself. So it's a great group. It's great to get all these diverse backgrounds together. And in the past, we've had a representative from the planning board on the trust, which we're trying to do again. And of course, we have Catherine from the select board, which is extremely important administratively in keeping things moving. Catherine, in the middle of a meeting, will email or text someone saying, hey, get this on your agenda, and help move things along. But let's do a screen share, and I can show you the chart we produced of trust activities over the past 14 years, and it's kind of fun to look at. So let me figure out how I can do this. There it is. Okay, good. Okay, can everyone see that? Good. It's probably the text is pretty small on your screens, but this is what we produce for our planning, strategic planning exercise, and we broke it into 4 categories, and they all begin with P, just for the heck of it. And they are policy initiatives, program, which is just sort of administrative programs, preliminary, which is planning exercises or sort of pre-development exercises, again, both beginning with P, and finally production, actual creation of dwelling units through whatever means we've had. Just looking at this, you'll see I can use my cursor. Elliott School, when we did this, was in the preliminary stage because we knew that there was an RFP request out, or an RFP out requesting proposals. So at this time, this was pre-proposal, and I'll get to that later on. But I just want to go through some of the production things we've done. That's down here. Our first project was at Cedar Gardens. The trust funded the creation of 2 accessible units where the entire Cedar Gardens property had no accessible units, which is very, unusual for a senior housing development of 200 plus units to have no accessibility. So the trust saw this as a worthy use of our funds, and we converted 2 units to accessible units. This was the start of our collaboration with the Natick Housing Authority, and we went through a period of doing, I think, 4 projects with the authority, both in turning either unoccupied or lowly occupied properties into viable housing developments, using trust money as sort of leveraging trust money to get additional funding through the public housing DHCD pipeline. And 2 of these projects were on Plain Street, which is a street that runs off of Pond Street, close to Natick Center. There was a duplex that the housing authority owned that was completely vacant, okay, and sort of blighting the neighborhood, unused. The trust saw this as a potential project and approached the authority saying, hey, do you want to do something with this? And the answer was yes. And again, we leveraged our money into making this into a project that now is occupied. Same thing with the Mariah Hayes congregate housing. That's next to the Coolidge development on South Main Street. Poorly, I think at one time there were 0 occupants of this congregate housing because the congregate model was so unpopular with potential tenants. You had to share a bathroom, for example, and there are better choices of housing for people. So it was very hard to occupy the building. It just wasn't working. So again, trust money was used to convert this into a housing for special needs housing. I forget the number of units, but they're more individual apartments, no more shared bathrooms, and it's fully occupied and run by a service provider now. The fourth Housing Authority project wasn't production. There wasn't any money spent on actual construction, but it was, I think, an important step for Cedar Gardens, which was a study. The trust funded a study to look at the potential redevelopment of Cedar Gardens, sort of bringing it into the 21st century with accessibility, amenities, and just upgrading the overall campus. Again, this was a trust idea. One of the members, Sue Selamoff, came up with this idea and said, hey, I think this is needed. And we approached the authority with the concept, and using the trust money, a study was done that looked at options for improving conditions at Cedar Gardens. So those are the 4 Housing Authority projects. The other construction project the trust has done is the development of Bacon Street into a duplex on Bacon Street, the west end of Bacon Street. And this was done in conjunction and partnership with Family Promise. And we also use Keith Tech as doing much of the construction. So it's a 3-way partnership: the trust, Keith Tech, and Family Promise in the development of a duplex, which is currently used by Family Promise as part of their housing of people who graduate from their homelessness program. So that was really our first foray into actual development. And it's something that was extremely time consuming, and it's something that the trust isn't really that interested in doing again because of the need for the hands-on involvement and the multiple procurement issues involved. It was extremely challenging to get it done. It's a successful project, but we're aiming to do greater impact with projects that have less demand on trust, time, and resources. Financial resources, yes, but sort of time resources was a burden in that. Other things on the chart, policy initiatives. Well, the program activity, we've been engaged in doing rental assistance during COVID, working with the Natick Service Council, where they are under contract with us to use our funds to assist in rental assistance. And this is ongoing. I think the Service Council should be at our next meeting to discuss, future plans for that. We've also done for, since 2016, what we call the Homeless Voucher Program, which was designed to assist short-term emergency homeless housing. And it was assisted by the Natick Police Department in that they would be the initial contact, and they would arrange for the housing of people who were literally living in cars or without a place to stay in the winter, and the trust would pay the hotel bill for that. So those are examples of other activities of the trust other than actual housing production. The preliminary category, the planning and pre-development stuff, I think one of the most significant sort of efforts of that was the veterans housing effort. I don't know if you recall the proposal to use the Henry Wilson historic monument memorial property as a veterans housing, which we thought had great synergy and great potential. This idea was actually brought to the trust by a citizen. The trust didn't come up with this idea, but we love it when someone comes to the trust with an idea about how we could do a project and get something done. The concept was furthered in a competition sponsored by the Federal Home Loan Bank, where teams of graduate students would take a project and work on the financial feasibility, the design, permitting issues, and put together a package that describes the development of a certain project. The veterans housing was one of these projects that was in the competition. A trust member, Ganesh Ramachandran, who you're familiar with in the CPA effort, was on that team actually while being a trust member, and the proposal won first prize in the competition. So it was a pretty fruitful effort. Actually, getting the veterans housing on the site has encountered some issues with sort of land use issues and the disposition of open space to other uses. We never really got a full handle on as to how that would be done, but there still is an ongoing effort by this one citizen and others to examine other potential sites for veterans housing in Natick, including we looked at surplus land at the MathWorks site, and across the rail trail, the AmVets property is another site that's being examined for potential veterans housing. So again, it's great when the trust combines forces with other groups, other entities, and works together on projects. And I think the veterans housing is a good example of what we did in the past and what we may be doing in the future. But today, the main thing that's happening is our application or our response to the RFP for the Auburn Street School, which came up during the summer. I think we became aware that there would be an RFP coming out. Is everyone familiar with the Auburn School site? Okay, well, it's South Natick.
Could you, go ahead and explain what it is? Yeah.
South Natick, pretty much across the street from the Riverbend campus, near, what is it, the Elliott Memorial Building?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and in front of the site, there's an open space sort of park presence that is frontage on Elliott Street and Auburn Street. And Auburn Street heads toward the Charles River, and the school is tucked back there. Historic building, built in the 30s, very small, compact little elementary school. And the trust saw this as a great opportunity for a larger affordable housing project in Natick. So we made the decision by vote to work towards the goal of using this property for affordable housing. And our strategy was to submit a response to the RFP from the trust, and also encourage other developers of affordable housing to do the same, because it's not high on the trust's desires to be the sort of administrator of this project, to be the developer, because the trust itself would do its own RFP to developers for the development of the process of the project, because we don't have the in-house resources to act as developer. We would if the property were transferred to the trust, then the trust would pursue other developers to create the affordable housing with a development agreement to do so. I thought it might be interesting to look at the trust's actual application to the or response to the RFP, and just go through the site and what we initially proposed, and then take a quick look at another respondent to the RFP, Metro West Collaborative Development, who was the entity that was involved with the Vets Housing team, also responded, and we're happy to see that. And they had their own proposal as to how to produce 100% affordable housing at the site. So I know that the RFP review process is underway for this. Ultimately, there will be interviews of potential applicants. There are two other applicants, a total of 4 altogether. One is a for-profit developer who is proposing market housing at the site, including the front portion of the site, that parkland that's in front of the site is also proposed for a single-family house. The other is a school for children with autism, to use the school for that purpose, and then the 2 affordable housing proposals. And like I said, the trust goal here is use the site for affordable housing. The town has, the town administration has repeatedly stated that they are in favor of the creation of affordable housing. Well, this is the time and the place for it. It's an opportunity that is, doesn't come up that often, to acquire a site at low acquisition price and have it well suited for affordable housing purposes. And throughout the nation, there are multiple examples of the use of surplus school buildings for housing. Also, it's not a unique idea. It's done again and again, and the Elliott School itself lends itself to doing that at the site. So I just thought I'd go through our application and emphasize, one of the reasons for being here today is, talking about the trust, talking about what we do, but also enlisting community support for the idea of doing affordable housing at the Auburn Street site. So those present, in your comings and goings, you're intermingling with select board members or whoever, when the opportunity does come up, it would be great to mention that, hey, affordable housing at Auburn Street, good idea. It's an opportunity that shouldn't just go by the wayside. There may be an inclination that, well, let's go for the proposal that is offering $2.5 million for the site, as opposed to the $1,000 or $1, which were the values that the affordable housing developers were offering. But it's expensive to make affordable housing, and it's a choice of what mission you want to support here. Sort of a financial bottom line mission about helping town budgets, or another financial decision that helps affordable housing. So that's the pitch, and we'll get back to more discussion of this later. But I just want to go through the trust application to get an idea about the site, about its feasibility for affordable, or for housing in general, and for the proposed program of senior housing at the site, and just take a look at what we submitted. So let me dig that up.
Randy, while you're digging that up, could I just jump in for a second?
Yep.
One of the things I want to emphasize for people who are thinking about this, came up at the select board meeting this past Wednesday. A citizen said, why don't we take the $2 million, since we're looking at a budget shortfall and a structural budget deficit? A way to think about that is that represents 1% of our annual budget. And we have so many seniors who are house and cash rich, and I mean, house rich, cash poor, who would love an opportunity to stay in Natick, sell their house, and move into some form of affordable housing. And I think this is a perfect answer to both of those things.
Yep.
And also, the Affordable Housing Trust is offering to buy the land for $1, but contribute $600,000 to a developer to build it. So as an incentive for developers to step forward. So I think it's a brilliant response. And if those of you who are listening review this and you agree, I would strongly suggest that you write your select board. You can just write selectboard@natick.org, and it comes to all of us, because it's going to need some heavy lobbying. That's just my 2 cents.
Mm-hmm. Thanks,
I
Catherine.
also want to throw in to echo Randy's comments about this being a very common use of old school buildings. In my previous life, one of the hats I wore was as a third-party reviewer for the environmental site assessments that get produced as part of the funding with, you know, when people are looking to do these affordable housing tax credits. There's all kinds of procedures they have to go through, and one of them is to do environmental site assessments. And I tried to calculate once how many units I had looked at over the years of potential units, and I think it was well over 100,000 in total. And many of them were old school. So it certainly is something that's being done and done successfully. So I just support that 100%.
Thanks. Good background there of seeing these projects. And a lot of the projects you do see have a sign in front of them saying, you know, funded by a CPA. Not all, but frequently that is a funding component. And Catherine, thanks for reminding me about the $600,000 incentive that the trust voted to offer for all proposers of affordable housing at the site. I mean, we were again, you know, saying, you know, this does not have to be awarded to the trust. You know, if another developer comes in with a good proposal, the trust would support that proposal with a financial assistance. So that was our strategy of moving this ahead. We tried. It's interesting. We tried to get that $600,000 award in an addenda to the RFP, but it wasn't possible because of, you know, sort of some legal issues. So what we ended up doing was emailing that information to everyone who requested the RFP. So in that way, everyone got that information sort of informally from the trust. And again, that 600,000 was envisioned to come from the Windy Low inclusionary zoning, which hasn't happened yet. So there's some lag time in actually providing that money. But there are other sources that could make up for the 600,000, such as the West Metro Home Consortium home funds could also be used to supply that money, which the trust could apply for.
So I'm mindful of letting Randy get through his proposal, but I also see Pat and Rick with their hands up. Is it something quick or a question that can be, go ahead, Pat. Oh, you got to come off mute.
Yeah, I just was curious what Randy mentioned about the veterans housing possibilities, not just the Henry Wilson site, but the large, somewhat underutilized parking lots at the VFW on West Central and the other one, the AMVETS.
Yep.
Is that what you? I mean,
Yeah.
that's a fair amount of land, isn't it?
Yeah, specifically the AMVET property. Bill Werner, who's been the vets housing bulldog here, the guy who came to the trust initially with the concept for the Henry Wilson site, is in discussion with the administration at AMVETS about potentially some offer to use the property for a fee or a purchase or whatever. And right across, Pat, right across from that is a MathWorks property that was part of a planning board decision to remain open space. So we've explored modification of that permit to allow the public interest use of housing on the site. Haven't really progressed that far with it. I think we have to do a preliminary site development plan to just illustrate what would be proposed and what's preserved. But both sites, I think, have potential, and they're oddly enough right across from each other.
Yeah, but I was noticing since COVID, the MathWorks Lakeside campus at least has a very, very large parking area, as well as a stacked garage. I mean, I just don't see how they're going to ever use that for parking.
Yeah, and it's actually parking from the UPS facility that's immediately adjacent to the MathWorks open space parcel that's on the rail trail. So there are potentially a couple other players in some sort of land use deal there. But this is where the trust gets into functioning as a developer. You know, we see a potential, we put together, you know, the parties that can help structure a deal and see if we can make it happen. And Auburn Street is actually a little bit easier than dealing with planning board decisions and MathWorks and other things. Auburn Street's a little bit more direct in that, you know, it's acquiring the property and proceeding with the development.
Let's take Rick's question and then let Randy proceed with showing us 5 Auburn Street proposal. Rick?
Yeah, this could be quick. This is just regarding the Auburn Street, and Trask is the developer who's proposing to build the house, I understand, and the multi-housing behind it. He's also the one doing Windy Low, who is slowed down by the fact that he, you know, as he started Windy Low, he acquired another farm that sold adjacent to his Greystone place. So he's now doing 12 townhouses there. I'm sure you know all this, but I'm just curious if he's been approached to sort of do a wash on the $600,000. In other words, he's already involved in a proposal there, and rather than you waiting to get his $600,000 or $800,000 and then giving it back to him, you know, couldn't he sort of be lined up for this? There might be a delay in his actually doing it, but I don't know. Seems like a thought you've probably pursued. So yes.
Haven't gone there yet, but interesting sort of negotiation. I think our approach now is, you know, just pretty less complicated than just pursuing it as you know, an applicant for the site, and less sort of negotiation with another party. Yeah, and thanks for the background and other Trask activities. I really wasn't trying to relate Windy Low's lack of progress with Greystone progress, but maybe that's part of the issue. I was guessing it was more just market conditions, you know, that didn't make it advantageous to move ahead with Windy Low at this time.
I don't know. He's not slowing down on the condos, and those did sell pretty quickly at Greystone, much more quickly than the housing. So he's moving pretty quickly on those. I think he'll be done with them within the year. Or sooner.
Yep. Well, then maybe Windy Low will get some activity. I mean, it looks like all the infrastructure was in with, you know, road base and utility connections. The sites are ready for construction, but not much going on.
Does the affordable housing bylaw kick in for his town units as well? Or does he have to pay in for a proportion of those units?
Ricky, I'm not sure.
I can speak because we were following that for the Open Space Committee. And in addition to providing open space, he provided a couple of affordable units in that. There are affordable units in the first original Greystone development, and there's a couple, 1 or 2 proposed in the second Greystone whatever it's called. I think it's called.
Martin, what do those affordable units amount to? I mean, as a unit, if you have to be income qualified, and how large are these things?
I don't have the details of that, but they're actual units on the site. It's not a payment to the trust fund. It's some actual units, and they're supposed to be more or less the same size as the market rate units, but there's questions about whether that's actually true.
I mean, I find that incredible. If you need an affordable unit, you're going to get a 2,000 square foot house, but at less money than the people who bought it. I mean, that to me doesn't make good sense.
So I can speak to that. I'll tell you how they work that. Same way they did in South Natick Hills. So the units are virtually indistinguishable. They're all the same looking from the outside in, but differences in the finishes. So a luxury home might have granite countertops, a sunken tub, hardwood floors, where you would have maybe vinyl tile floors and not Formica, but silestone or something like that. So that's the way they make it work. Until you get inside, you don't know any different. And that's deliberate. It's so that people don't feel stigmatized by.
Right. Okay.
But that's where they make it up. So somebody who's in an affordable housing unit, I actually looked at them at South Natick Hills. Really, really beautiful. And they're still nice inside. It's just you don't have all those luxury touches with like recessed lighting, crown molding, 6-inch baseboards and things like that.
But the size of the unit is the same?
Not always, but so at South Natick Hills, they have a range of different sizes. So you might have a luxury 2,000 square foot and an affordable 2,000 square foot. You might have a 3-bedroom family-sized affordable unit. I don't know how big that would be, but then you'd have a luxury one. They somehow make the economics work.
And then what are the demands on the tenant? How do they qualify for an affordable unit?
But there'd have to be a lottery for the unit, and part of the lottery would be demonstration of income and assets that would make them eligible.
I see.
But another thing that happens in condo developments is that there's also the condo fee too, which further lessens the ability of people to reside in the unit because of the added cost.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, let's take a look at your proposal there.
Yeah. Well, to wrap this up, I should mention that the Trask proposal did include some payment to the trust. And I'm not sure if that was an anticipation of inclusionary zoning requirement or just an offer. My guess it's the part of the inclusionary bylaw. Before I get into the proposal, I think the trust is becoming less in favor of payment like that in lieu of production, in that we're trying to encourage, sort of more diverse communities. And if the developer were required to do actual production of housing units as opposed to payment in lieu of production of the units, then you would make a more diverse residential condition. So that's something the trust has to grapple with, is whether we would refuse payment in lieu of production in favor of actual production of units within the development. So that's kind of an aside as to something the trust has to consider. Okay, let's look at Auburn Street. Like I said, a great building, built in the 30s or so, but at the same time, it was a fairly modern building for the time. The entire facade that faces the river is very interesting in that, the big expanses of windows, integration of the mechanical equipment into the fenestration. Just a very progressive image of a building that from the Elliott Street side looks very traditional. The other side looks very contemporary for the 30s. I think I should have some photo of that somewhere. So this is just the cover page of our application. Yeah, so the school is composed of the classroom wing, and then there's the gymnasium auditorium wing that's connected with it, which has good potential as civic space in addition to being, housing space too. So that was part of our proposal, is that its use would be both for the residents and for the greater community, trying to encourage that. Yeah, there's the date 38, sort of Depression era construction. We engaged a historic preservation consultant to look at the proposal and see if it would be eligible for historic tax credit funding. And it was. Some adjustments have to be made to our proposal, but in general, the building and our proposed new construction would be suitable for historic tax credit funding. So just go through the package we included in the application. This is a study of the site now. Okay, in the black is the school building and the auditorium area and the rest of the neighborhood. And the next view shows the addition, which is, the school building is so small that you do need an element of new construction to make a suitable number of units that make sense to make into a project. So we ended up with 23 units of housing. I think there were something like 11 in the existing building and another 12 in the new construction area over here. We chose that part of the site because it was sort of out of the way of the open space on this side of the project and could easily connect with the main building. That way, a single elevator could serve all levels within the building, both the existing construction and the proposed new construction. So just go back and forth one more time with that. Here's the proposed footprint of the buildings, and there's the existing condition. Yep, there you go. Okay, so moving on, existing site plan, very interesting because there is frontage on the Charles River. Not the easiest access because of the sloping bank that exists leading down to the river. Right now, this area towards the river is an open field and parking. The area on the side of the building is again open. It's used as a playground now, or was used as a playground when the school was in more active use. And then this is the portion, you can see my cursor moving here, that's on Elliott Street, open space. It's like a town common appearance, treed, landscaped, very attractive forefront to the historic building. So that's the existing site. The proposed site in the green is the new construction element. The hatched area is the existing building. I think we ended up with about 1 parking stall per apartment. And that seems to be the appropriate ratio, more or less, for senior housing. The permitting approach for this would be a friendly 40B, which a 40B process, you can work with the town, make the project eligible through an initial review, and then you work with the zoning board in crafting a proposal that works for the neighborhood, neighbors, the town, and abutting properties. So there are a number of zoning relief items that are needed here, such as the site is currently zoned single family. There's some other use that would not permit multifamily. That's where the 40B zoning relief would come in. And there are potential other ways of dealing with it, but that was the choice that we made as the zoning approach. As far as the actual floor plan, here's the existing floor plan, very simple. There are 2 levels of 3 classrooms on the river facing side. This must have been a great school to go to because, you know, fantastic views and beautiful classrooms, and it was really pretty nice. There's also 3 units at the lower level, which aren't as desirable because they are partially below grade, and they look out into an areaway. There is natural light. Our proposal would to use those lower level spaces by increasing the size of the areaway to let in more light and have some landscaping right outside the lower level windows. So existing floor plan, you know, the classrooms on the riverside and then support spaces on the Elliott Street side. The proposed space planning was reuse of the classroom spaces for 1-bedroom apartments, and the sizes work out very well for 1-bedroom senior apartments in the conversion of classroom space into apartment units, and then using some of the space on the Elliott Street side for slightly smaller 1-bedroom units, you know, combining some of the obsolete bathroom and support spaces to make them into units. Then a central elevator is designed to serve all the units or all the levels in the building, of which there are 4 levels. There's the entrance level at grade, there's the lower level, and the 2 upper levels. So it's a little tricky to do that with a single elevator, but this works in allowing sort of 2 doors out of the elevator to do the multiple levels. Then the new construction is a 2-level addition with a total of 12 units, which is connected to the existing building with a bridge or a link that goes through the auditorium space at the upper level of the auditorium space. So the whole building is, you know, the new and old are combined with this link through the auditorium space and the new elevator to get accessibility to all the levels of the building. And we didn't take the design much beyond this. We didn't do elevations of the building. You know, we didn't get into specific images of what the new construction was. We kept it pretty general because we didn't want to pigeonhole any future developer into a specific image or approach. But we just wanted to basically show the feasibility of, you know, 23 units, senior housing, 1-bedroom apartments on the site. I think we also did a timetable of the schedule, and you know, this is actually a pretty aggressive schedule that gets occupancy somewhere in 2026. So that shows that it takes a while to get these projects underway. We would have to solicit developers, do the all the steps of pre-development due diligence, do the construction drawings, get it priced, go out to bid, do the permitting. All those steps have to be done here. I thought it might be interesting. So this was the trust's proposal. I thought it might be interesting to look at what the other affordable housing developer was proposing. And again, an equally interesting scheme that actually has more units. And they pretty much condensed their design to a single page, which showed the existing building with no change in footprint to the existing building, with new construction on the river side of the building, with parking that goes, or an access road that goes around the existing building. This proposal has 32 units, so you know, about 10 more than the trust, of family housing, with unit sizes varying between 1-bedroom and 3-bedroom. So again, you know, great proposal by this group. Has the advantage of more units and different housing program, family versus senior.
Can I ask a quick question about this one and the parking? I've always been curious, what is the flooding aspect of the parking lot and having a new building there and levels, has there ever been any concern about that?
Well, there's stormwater concerns whenever you increase the impervious area on a site. And here, both proposals increase the impervious area. And the key is you can't increase the runoff from the site from its pre-development state to the post-development state. So the way that this is done is with subsurface recharge chambers that introduce roof water or parking water into the ground, sometimes with purification steps that make it good or clean groundwater addition to the groundwater. I believe the site is outside of the FEMA flood zone. It's raised up high enough, so there's no flooding issues. You don't have to be concerned with displacement of flood water here. It's mostly a stormwater issue that you'd have to design for. And there are highly competent civil engineers that can take sites like this and accomplish that. You could have recharge chambers under this area here or under this parking area here that make it happen. Elaine's project in Westport had a elaborate system of stormwater storage underneath a parking lot that actually had large chambers that collected the water. So there are multiple ways of making it happen with the addition of new impervious area.
Thank you.
Cool. I see Cindy's got her hand up.
Yeah, just a question. The land to the left in this picture of the new building that they propose all the way to the river is still part of the property? It looked
Yes.
like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How many acres is the whole property?
Let me see if it shows up on the existing survey.
I'm just curious for like a ratio or something there.
Yeah. Do I see it anywhere? Maybe we obliterated that information. My guess it's probably an acre and a half, something like that.
Okay.
So not that big.
Thank
So
you.
the ratio of units per acre, about between 20 and 30 units per acre. So it's high density, high density in comparison to the single family zoning around it.
Yes.
But the rest, the area is fairly institutional too, with schools and churches and office buildings, on Pleasant Street. So while it is a single family district, surrounding uses are varied and varied in size also. That's where our sort of footprint diagram comes in. If I can get to it. Oh, there it is. You see sort of other uses of sort of larger footprints. And then here's the office use here. The parking lots back up to the back of this site. The property line.
I guess what I was noticing is that when they put that new building there, there's still a huge amount of land beyond that to the river that's just left
right.
away.
Yeah, and it's essentially a wetland resource area once you get beyond the existing play fields, because the land drops off fairly quickly.
Okay.
That proposal would have to do a little bit more in the environmental permitting aspect with riverfront protection area issues and buffer zone issues. But in that it's previously developed land, it's already a lawn area, they would probably not have that much issues with that. They do seem to be fairly close to the property line, and maybe that would need some adjustment, just in terms of building code issues.
I just ran over to the town database while we were talking. It's 2.84 acres is the whole piece of property there.
Great, thanks.
Cool.
And my goal here is not to compare the two schemes really, but just to show, an alternative proposal.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I mean, having the Metro West Collaborative Development Scheme selected, is actually consistent with the trust's goal for the site, in that it accomplishes the main goal of affordable housing. Having the trust application selected also accomplishes that, but it's a little bit less expedient because the trust then would have to do our own RFP for developers.
Mhm.
So, both can work, and both accomplish the affordable housing. And that again is where, participants at the coffee come into play, in that, it's your opportunity to, as Catherine said, send a memo to the select board saying, hey, I've given this some thought, and, the town always says that, affordable housing is important. This is a good chance to make it happen.
So I see Pat has his hand up, but I'm also going to interject with one question of my own, it's much more generic. As I listen to this presentation, and thank you, Randy. I mean, the complexity and depth of analysis and work that the trust does is just astounding. And then I'm thinking, like so many other activities in town, you guys are all volunteers. I'm wondering if you'd like to speak just for a moment about what your own personal motivation is for being involved in this from the get-go.
Yeah, it's a good question. And you can ask every trust member that. And I think the basic answer is realization of the need for housing opportunities in Natick that have affordability. I mean, you look at the Globe, Sunday Globe's listing of property sales in Natick, and your jaw drops in that there's nothing under $1 million. Right. And what does that mean for the viability of the town? I mean, that's one thing at one end of, sort of competing with market housing. And the other end is, the people on the trust have, work heavily in special needs populations too, that there's a broad spectrum of housing needs. Personally, my history of joining the trust was I was on the Conservation Commission for 19 years. And I didn't want it to be 20 years because, that would be way too much. So I retired from the Conservation Commission. And then a couple of years later, my wife saw something in probably the Bulletin, Natick Bulletin, that said, hey, the Affordable Housing Trust is being formed and looking for members. And our business, our architectural business, does primarily multifamily housing, and most of it's affordable housing. So I kind of know the affordable housing industry well enough to feel that I could be a good contributor to the trust, and applied, got on it, and it's been a great experience. And I've multiple trust members have said, man, this is the best board to be on. We get a lot done, we have a lot of fun, and we have fun doing it. So it's been a great experience, I think, for everyone to be part of the trust.
That's a nice testimonial, especially given that, if I understand correctly, there's a couple of vacancies on the board too. Is that true, or?
Well, we filled one vacancy, but we've amended our charter to allow 2 more positions, okay? One of which we envision to be a planning board member, and the other is open. So we see the benefit of, right now we're 9 members. We see the benefit of being 11 and doing a lot of our work in sort of a subcommittee of format, and just the more minds, the better. We're not like a regulatory board that, has 5 or 7 members and you take votes on, thumbs up, thumbs down with permitting issues. We're more, it's a development organization that benefits from the bodies and the interest and the commitment that makes things happen.
Great, thanks. Pat, you've been patient.
Yeah, Randy, just huge fan of your work and what you and Jay and Ricky and other folks have done for years and years on affordable housing. I was just have a quick question about that pathway to the river. Was it a possibility for a you know, like a car top place for residents and the public to get to the river?
Well, you know, Pat, you probably know this, but you know, I've been a big proponent of small craft storage, you know, on Lake Cochituate and Charles River as a way of enabling residents to get water access if you don't have a house on the lake.
Right.
And I think finding a way to do that is important, and this may be a site where that could even happen, that there could be a boat storage in a launching area. The grades aren't that attractive. You need conservation permitting because of the wetland disturbance. But you know, I think if not here, somewhere else. And we've always been a proponent. I mean, people have come to us knowing that we're looking at this site and said, be sure to include waterfront access as part of the proposal.
Yeah, and I think that all the controversy about Pleasant Street, you know, that was another interesting area that could have been maybe not a powerboat, but a car top access point. But it got so embroiled in all the other issues, the contamination on the site and so forth. The town backed away from it.
Well, as far as boat access, that would be a better site, you know, just because it's the grades are closer to the river.
Yeah.
Thanks. Brindley, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. You guys actually just asked and answered half of what I was asking with the public water access and the members on the trust. I am curious, once you've hopefully gotten the person from the planning board to be on the trust, what is the skill sets? What type of person are you looking for to fill that last position?
Good question. There's no statutory requirement for the composition of the trust, okay? Historically, we've had, you know, tried to do contractor, real estate, banking, some development background, architect is not a specific requirement, but architects tend to gravitate to the trust.
Legal.
There's also a member from the housing authority, a tenant, a housing authority tenant on the trust, and legal. I forgot to mention legal, and there's also citizens at large too. So having an interest in affordable housing is probably the main ingredient that everyone has, and you don't necessarily have to have professional background in any specific industry that fills a role on the trust. So is that a good enough answer, you think?
Yeah, I guess what I was absolutely. I think what I was interested in is, if you look at where you are now, where are your holes in terms of what you would love as skill sets?
Yeah, I think
with that other to you know what I mean? Is that
Yep.
a better explanation?
Yeah. The new member, David Fishman, comes from a finance background. So it actually fills none of the categories I'd mentioned before, but has interest in big picture views of how you get things done, and an interest in affordable housing. Right now, the resignation was on the real estate side. Real estate broker left the trust, so that's some conceptual vacancy, and we haven't had sort of a contractor builder on the trust, I think, ever. I think I initially satisfied that perceived role as an architect, and I'm not a contractor.
And the last question is it because it's a trust and not a committee, do you function the same way as other committees, meaning meeting laws and the public are welcome to come, and do you do them on Zoom in person? How do you function in that aspect?
Yeah, totally have to comply with the public meeting law. Over the past couple of years, all the meetings have been virtual. I think we're on the verge of doing hybrid meetings, but haven't pull that off yet because we want to make sure the technology is good enough to function as a hybrid meeting. But you bring up a broader question about the relationship with the town, okay? And sometimes we're viewed as a separate entity from the town, and sometimes we're viewed as a component of the town. And it goes back and forth, actually. And sometimes the person who's making the judgment does it to their own sort of interest as to how to view the trust. For a while, we were using the legal counsel, town legal counsel. It had access to them, and that was rescinded because of the opinion that the trust was a separate entity and not eligible for the use of town council. So we're separate, but still combined. The finances all go through the treasurer, and all members are appointed by the select board. So that's a strong link. I think what we're working on now is better communication between the trust and other town boards and trust and town administration. We've been through some pretty frustrating periods where getting responses on questions took way too long. And we're trying to improve channels of communication where town administration looks at the trust as, an important function in the town and is supported by the necessary resources. The Department of Community Development used to have a personnel who were assigned to the trust to support the trust as a housing planner, which was very helpful for the trust. And that position has not been refilled. So the trust is sort of operating with sort of less than previous capacity to, know about things and enact things. That person who was the position that filled was an important liaison with the West Metro Home Consortium. And we don't really have that now. So we're trying to build a structure that compensates for that.
Is there a social networking, marketing, public perception involvement component somewhere in that?
We have a website, but we frequently talk about press releases and ways of elevating the stature and awareness of the trust in the greater community. And I think we could definitely benefit from more effort in that department. And while this meeting is a step forward, of course, an example of trust talking about what we do.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me just echo that thanks. This has been super illuminating for me, I think for all of us. And, again, I'm just blown away by how involved and professional all the work is. We are drawing close to our normal adjourning time, but I see that Cindy's got a question. You got to come off mute, Cindy.
I noticed that there's something called Jay's Law in your timeline, and I don't know if that's a long story, but if it's short, it sounds kind of interesting.
Well, it's a great question, and you're very observant to pick that out. I didn't mention it, but that was one of our policy initiatives, that during the construction of Bacon Street, we found that the procurement laws required us to, for relatively minor expenses, to go through central register and procurement processes. Jay's Law proposed that housing trusts be exempt from some of the procurement requirements, or changing the financial thresholds for public bid elements of procurement. And Jay Ball actually drafted the proposed legislation and submitted it to Representative Linsky, and it didn't proceed. Okay. And once the Bacon Street was developed, the initiative kind of petered out. But it was a concern of the trust that this is a very awkward process to for a municipal entity to construct a small project. And that's part of the reason why it's not a great idea for a trust to do a small project, in that there's a lot of regulatory stuff that we have to
Yeah,
adhere to.
I came away from the party. I talked to you and a couple of other people, just thinking like, on the legislative level, somebody should, like, I hope there are people working at that level to reduce the red tape involved in getting, so that small projects can be viable. Because I was thinking, talking about the size and what things look like from the outside, that, if I were wanting affordable housing, I think I would much rather live in a house that looked like everybody else's house on a street with neighbors, instead of in a multifamily situation, especially if I had kids. I'd want them to have a yard.
Yeah.
And I can just picture, you've got all those different entities, you've got federal, you've got state, you've got this, that, and I hope somebody's working at that level to make that. Do you know anything about that?
Well, where my mind was going is, that's the reason why affordable housing development has to reach a critical mass of number of units. That to do an 8-unit affordable housing proposal is a challenge. You have to go through the same hoops that you would for a 80-unit development, with 1/10 the impact.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the incentive to do larger projects in general.
Okay.
But the idea of, the small project model probably is better run by not a public entity right now.
Okay.
I know Ricky's also got her hand up. Ricky, you just need to unmute. You find that.
Thank you.
There you go.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, I have, having heard or just barely seen the plan of the consortium proposal, what makes our proposal superior to theirs? Where they're proposing more units, they're proposing a variety of units, family as well as smaller units. Why should we not support, all get behind their proposal?
Well, like I said, Ricky, but my goal wasn't really to compare or evaluate the proposals, but just be objective about describing them. The trust is going to meet an executive session at our next meeting to discuss the Metro West proposal. And I think at that time, the strategy of, what makes the most sense will be discussed. And, we're not selecting we're not awarding this, we're an applicant. So our ability to, weigh one versus the other isn't super productive. I think the main message is affordable housing is the answer to the site.
Exactly.
Go ahead, Rick. Sorry.
In that vein, I would suggest that we as individuals all well, if there is a way to keep us abreast of the process, so that when the time for public participation and public input becomes important, that we are aware of it, and that we can either appear at the select board's meeting when it's not on the agenda, so that we can be part of public speak. Jay and I discussed it, and we would like to appear at the selectmen's meeting to speak for the use of this project in as totally affordable housing, not as a cash cow. And so that we'd like to work with all of you and maximize the weight that each of us can bring to bear through the process, to make sure that we end up with affordable units. The other question, while I have the floor, is to ask our proposal, the trust proposal talks about senior housing, 24 units of 1-bedroom senior housing. I hope that as part of the discussion of what the trust is going to really push for, that there is a question of whether or not senior housing is the one that has the greatest need at this particular juncture, or whether or not a mix of over 65 and family and senior, that kind of a blend addresses the overall needs of the lower income population that wants to remain in Natick. Our list of housing, we vacate at the Housing Authority approximately 10 units every month, either from people having passed away or people moving into nursing homes or moving in with family. So that I think that is an area of need that ought to be checked out to see whether or not the Housing Authority is able to satisfy the lowest income senior needs of Natick. The process of filling those needs has been moved to the state level, and we no longer have control of filling those spaces locally. So that's an issue in determining need of local residents for placement in subsidized housing. But it's something that Jay and I are very happy to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, when you do address the select board, it would be an interesting question to talk about the actual housing programs being proposed. Because, I mean, typically there is more community input in affordable housing proposals. And the way this is set up in this RFP process is pretty much, well, make a proposal and that's it. You know, you have to live by it. I mean, your question could be, how much flexibility is there in adjusting the proposals of, to address different ranges of tenant population? So I think that'd be an interesting question.
Well, at any rate, I just wanted to put out there that I think we need to actively campaign for what we want to see happen and not let this fall into the category of cash cow. I think it's a fabulous opportunity. It's a fabulous opportunity to advance affordable housing in whatever, shape it ends up being, and we shouldn't lose it.
Yeah, I think you have a pretty receptive audience to that opinion, Ricky. So,
I just hope that everybody is, in their own mind deciding that they are going to play an active role in helping the select board make that determination. I thank you.
You too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And again, I thank you, Randy, for joining us very much this morning.
A pleasure.
Yeah.
And sorry I had to jump on a call, but Randy, I doubt in Natick this will be an issue, but as I said in a previous life, I spent hours and hours and reviewed thousands of reports done for housing tax credits on the environmental side. So I would be happy to be a resource if that ever were to come up as something that was a question.
Thanks. That's very, very nice of you to offer that. Thank you.
Great. I think that pretty much wraps us up. Ricky, I wanted to ask you, we have on the schedule next week, Rabbi Weiss. Were you able to confirm that she's available?
Yes, I was able to, and she's very excited to be part of our program. And she asked me, what should I, what would they be interested in hearing from me? And I said, give us a little of your background and what your interests are, and they'll be happy to make it a free flow Q&A, and you guys can give direction. She's a fascinating woman. She is energetic. I've never had a rabbi meet me in her workout clothes and coming to see me on her bicycle. She did that after there was a bar mitzvah at the temple. It was Natick days, and she hurried up, changed her clothes, got on her bike, and rode to the common, and which is where I started to, I figured there was a collection of town, the whole town was there. So I walked around with her and introduced her to people. And she is an eclectic, exciting, really wonderful woman, and a great addition, I think, to our community. And my one regret is that I've moved out of town and become an expatriate when she moved in. So I look forward to it, and I hope you will enjoy her.
She should have put you up on her handlebars and you could have gone around quicker. Well, that sounds very exciting. I'm looking forward to that for next week. And then the following week, we'll have Doug Drenick from Natick Trails giving us an update on their activities. And then we'll take a couple-week break around the holidays at the end of the month and resume in January. But again, thank you, Randy. And Martin, you probably turn off the recording, and we'll have this up on the YouTube site later today, probably.